Welcome to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik, a podcast about the stories that connect us.
3, 2, 1, and we're live. Hi, I'm Eric Grove. I'm a writer, and this is my friend Cylia. She's a reader. And we are recording. You are watching or listening to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik, and we have with us today Mary Berman. Mary and I met at Viable Paradise Workshop in Martha's Vineyard. Mary specifically, I think my most specific memory was using our oven, because you had gotten a frozen pizza and your room in Martha's Vineyard did not have an oven to cook the frozen pizza, which I assume means that I take a lot of credit for any success that comes out of Viable Paradise for you, because I provided that. Actually, I think my roommate gets more of the credit on that one. Mary, what have you been up to since cooking a pizza in my shared hotel room in Martha's Vineyard?
Well, my most prominent memory of you from Martha's Vineyard, and I think this was you. I might say this and you might be like, that wasn't me. But I was one of the first people to leave, and somebody, and I think it was you, Erik, gathered everybody off to see me off as if it was like a parade. And that was, I would say one of the highlights of my writing life so far. So, so that was really nice. So thank you for having me back here, which is now going to be the second highlight of my writing life so far.
Awesome. As I recall, I set alarms when everybody was going to leave, because I'm that.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. You are a real community fixture, Erik, as I'm sure has been said of you many times. Yeah, so I've been good. I sold a book. It's coming out in May. It's coming out May 19th, Until Death, my wedding planning / mother with dementia horror novel. And apart from being the big update, that's almost the only thing I can think about right now. So I don't.
I
could see how that seems like a big deal
on this podcast.
Wow, what a crazy coincidence.
In fact, both Erik and I did read your book, and I have been dying to talk to him about it, and I have restrained myself so I could save it all for this podcast recording. But before we dive into your upcoming book birthday, what I like to start by asking people is, what is in your book DNA? And that doesn't just mean, obviously, it could be what led into Until Death, but it also is what are the first stories that created the structure of who Mary is today?
Yeah, I think my answer to that question is really corny.
I love corny.
But I think it's very sentimental. I think it is the stories that my father read to me when I was very, very, very small. My first exposure to fiction, to narrative fiction, to storytelling. Some examples would be Charlotte's Web, Tom Sawyer, The Princess Bride, which I really, really love. I love the movie too, but the book is just so dear to my heart. And when I was thinking about what it was about all of these books that, I don't know, wormed its way in, you know what I mean? Got into the cracks and grew there. One, obviously, is just kind of the sense of wonder, when you're a child and someone is reading you stories for the first time, you're like, oh my God. But I also think that a lot of these books, I was about to say, did a thing that I had never seen done before, which makes sense because I was 5 years old. But with The Princess Bride in particular, as an example, there's a scene where the narrator is really mad at something that's not fair, and someone says to him, life is not fair, and he was like, oh my God, of course it's not. And that's a huge realization for the character, and that was something that I think at the moment when I was exposed to it, I had known to be true, but hadn't realized I knew it until someone else wrote it down. And I think that sort of early exposure to that phenomenon is something that has gotten into my book DNA as a writer and reader. That would be some of the early shaping. I have one blurb actually on Until Death from Matt Johnson, where he says that I'm a writer who's not afraid to drag you there. And that was actually very, very touching to me, because I feel like those early books did like drag me there. You know what I mean? So I took that as very high praise.
Once you started choosing your own books to read, you know, after and I'm assuming
After my
your
dad,
father doesn't
after I
still
could
read
read
to you to bed, but that is a big assumption on my part.
No, but it actually is weird when I reread books that he read to me, I can only hear them in his voice. And sometimes I'll pick up a book that I think I haven't read before, and very rarely, but I'll pick up a book I think I haven't read before, and I'll hear it, and I'll be like, oh my god, he read this to me, like, before I was, like, forming long-term memories. It's really, really weird. So he's not doing it, but, like, in a way, he still is doing it some of the time. So
It's kind of magical thing to have, like a connection to have.
yeah.
So once you started choosing your own books, what are the ones that stuck with you?
Totally. Fantasy. I was like all children's fantasy all the time. It actually took me not a very long time, but I don't think I started reading books that were targeted for adults until I was in middle school. And I definitely know some people who started reading adult fiction like a lot earlier than that. But I just loved, like, you know, at that time, obviously, we all did love Harry Potter. I loved the Lemony Snicket books. There's I think it's underrated. Maybe you guys are going to tell me those books were huge. But by Jonathan Stroud, the Bartimaeus trilogy, really, really excellent. Some books by Garth Nix, especially the series of his called The Seventh Tower, which, reading it as an adult, I was like, these are IP. Like, someone like commissioned him to write these. So You Want to Be a Wizard, Diana Wynne Jones, just the contemporary classics of children's fiction, children's magic fiction really spoke to me. I think, again, leaning more into the sense of wonder at that point than to people like delivering hard truths via the medium.
I will say, you talking about reading Harry Potter still in childhood does make me realize we are of different generations, as that definitely came out after I was through college. So I'll just fly into dust at the end of the episode. It's totally fine.
I'm sorry.
And
I wouldn't have guessed.
I'll take it. Well, I mean, my offspring is 28, and so helping them discover these books and that's how I stayed abreast of them, is because I was like, oh no, I'm helping by making sure I'm reading them before you, but actually it's just an excuse to read more. That's always my excuse. So You Want to Be a Wizard actually has been republished a couple different times. For those that want to know, you can go find the old school versions, or she re-released them in the millennial edition, so she could add in things like cell phones and things like that, which is fantastic. One thing that makes me think of, though, and so I'm curious if you've read it, and if not, I would add it to your to be read list, would be the Christopher Crestomancy series.
Oh, totally. That's what I meant by Diana Wynne Jones, actually.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. And then
A+.
when I was older, when I was a kid, I really liked the one about Cat was my favorite, which I think was the second one if you take them in chronological order. But sometime in the last couple years, I think there are 7, and the latter 3 or 4 don't actually have anything to do with the first few. They just take place in the world of Crestomancy, and then Crestomancy shows up occasionally, like at the end to like do something. You know what I mean? And they're really good.
I haven't read those last 3, so this is telling me I need a reread.
Yeah, I'll try. If I remember, I'll send you all of them afterwards. But one of them is called The Pinho Egg. That's the one that I remember specifically as being one where I was like, the hell is that? But they're all good. They all stand up. Totally.
Oh, I love that. I feel like I'm like waiting to see if I'm not going to step on Erik asking a question too.
We ventured into the area where I have not read most of these books, so I'm just going to stay quiet until I can pipe in with something.
The like kids magic fiction, I think I'm like outdated by probably at least 10 years though. Like now I'm going to date myself, but I remember at one point, like after college, reading the Percy Jackson books, and I was like, "Damn, these are also bangers!" Like, like it's nice to see that the traditions continue. That the youth can always, get something good.
I mean, that gets into the different mythos, right? Because that is a retelling of a lot of the Greek mythologies and gods and stuff. And I definitely am having a flashback to in 5th grade getting really geeked about Egyptian mythology and being
Totally,
like, did
same.
you know what Set did to Osiris's
Totally.
private parts and in the river? And no one else
Yeah.
wanted to talk to me about this.
Another, this one isn't Egyptian, but another example of a book that, like, I really, really loved as a kid that I returned to over and over again was a children's telling of the Greek myths called Heroes, Gods, and Monsters of the Greek Myths by a guy called Bernard Evslin. And I still think about them all the time. Like, those are the versions of the myths that really, like, chiseled their way into my head and stayed there. And like obviously later I read like Bulfinch's mythology and stuff and like Edith Hamilton, and I was like, I like Bernard Evslin better. Like I think they
It
have
just
more heart.
imprinted
I
on
really
you.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I am curious, when you revisit books that you read when you were younger, or I guess books that would have been targeted to you when you were younger, but you maybe didn't read them. Are you reading them just for the joy of reading, or are you also analyzing them as a writer? Like, how is your perspective different now when you return to something that you may have read, say, when you were 12, versus when you, obviously it's different, but I'm kind of curious, like, are you able to put yourself into the mind frame of the audience, or are you looking at it from the adult creative perspective?
That's a really interesting question. I think, one, I don't write. I have not yet written children's fiction, so I suspect that the things that are being done on a craft level are things that I am less attuned to, which probably makes it easier for me to read them for what they are instead of from a perspective of writerly analysis. I also think that there's like, I don't know quite what the age would be, but I think there's a cutoff point where if I read something before a certain age, maybe like age 13, I'm not sure I'm able to actually go back and read it with clear eyes. I would also say, like, I also had really great taste, so all of the things that I loved as a child are good.
What does the clear eyes mean? Does that mean like without
I just
bias
mean that if
to, like,
something, yeah, I guess I mean like if I read something as a kid and I loved it, I don't think I'm capable of going back and being like, oh, that was mediocre. Like, I just
Okay.
don't think that, even if
Like, it's
you
in
know,
too
I
deep.
mean, it's all subjective. It's in too deep, and the way that I felt the first time I read it, I loved it too much. Like, it's like a lighter version of how there are certain books I can't read without my father's voice in my head. Like, there are certain books I can't read without, in some very, very pale way, I think, re-experiencing what I experienced the first time. Which is kind of nice, actually.
Looking through this list of what you've shared so far, did you ever read the Madeleine L'Engle series?
No, I did. You mean the Wrinkle in Time books?
Yeah, she actually has 2 separate series, both in the same world, but one's much more fantastical and one's like Meet the Austins, and it's more like mundane world. But yeah,
Okay.
Wrinkle in Time is in that fantastical aspect of hers.
Yeah, that's so the Wrinkle in Time quartet I did read as a child. I didn't know about the other one. I did not love them. I liked the first one best, most specifically because of the scene where like all of the kids are bouncing the balls in unison. That really got to me. But yeah, they weren't my thing. They were not my jam.
I mean, I'll just point out you did become a horror writer, and that is the most horror one of her
It's so
books
good.
and scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say this because I am an avowed I don't read horror person, and I read your book, and I keep bringing up
Sorry.
other books I've read, and then Erik tells me that they were horror after the fact. So it could be that my my self-identification as a non-horror reader needs to be reevaluated, but I'm going to wait to really do introspection on that for a lot longer until Erik drags me there.
Well, the definitions of horror are interesting, and this is one of the questions that I had for you, Mary, because your book is described, at least in one spot, I think it may be on the main page at your publisher, as literary horror, and I have some ideas what distinguishes literary horror from other horror, but I am curious what is your experience with literary horror? Did you set out to write literary horror? Did you set out to write literary and then you said, oh, it's kind of horror? Or did you set out to write horror and said, oh, it's kind of literary? Because this comes into that questionable space, like maybe some of what Cilia's experiencing with horror isn't that she doesn't like horror, it's that the definitions of horror, there are specific angles of horror that are less appealing than others.
Yeah, it's interesting, Cilia, that you say that you're not a horror reader, but that we're talking about some horror books now, because I didn't think I was a horror writer until someone else pointed it out to me,
because you were just writing
8 years ago now, right? And with short fiction, I actually started to have more luck with it when I started sending it to horror markets, which was something that I would not have thought to do myself because I didn't think that was what I was doing. Mm-hmm. As far as the distinction between horror and, literary horror and, various other subgenres of horror, for Until Death, I think the literary tag comes from the fact that I was spending a lot of time on the prose, which I think is just sort of often, I know that in the genre space, the distinction between literary and genre and so on and so forth gets very tangled and hot, but I think that often when I use literary as an adjective instead of a noun, if that makes sense, I think it's often just referring to a certain set of conventions around how the prose is working, how the sentences are working, and those were things that I tried to tilt into, and then the horror is the plot. I think it's a horror plot.
So from your perspective, it's a horror book with literary mechanics, maybe a literary engine under the hood, but the vehicle itself is
I think that's right, or even literary paint, literary paint job.
And was that where you started, or did it start to drift more horror when you were working on the project?
I think it started from a horror place. I think that was the shift that happened some 8 years ago when someone was like, you should send some of these to horror markets, that once I started thinking of my work consciously as horror, I was able to lean into the things that were already working about it. And that was something that I was doing when I wrote this book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Without getting into any spoiler territory, what I'll say is, while it goes into the kind of potential for that supernatural horror aspect, and picks up pace at the end, the part that struck me as horror was the very visceral dread I was feeling while reading through her coping mechanisms and self-talk. It was too real. I did have to stand up at one point and drink a cold glass of water, use some things I've literally learned in grounding exercises to re-anchor myself in my body, because I was oh, this is a lot. This is too real. I probably should self-examine some things that are responding too strongly with this character. That's cool. Totally fine here.
Well, I'm happy to hear it. Sorry.
No. Sorry, not sorry. Literally that, it said it on the tin. I knew what I was getting into, and it delivered.
Thanks. Right on.
Well, and most horror, not most, but a lot of excellent horror, the real dread and the real visceral dread is from the more mundane, less supernatural elements.
100%.
For me, the things that were deeply I'm going to say horrible, but I don't like that word. I just like horrific.
Yeah.
Like horrific.
Yeah.
We're going to go with horrific. We're going to pretend that's where I start. Yeah, horrorful. The where the the relationship between the main character and her mother. I mean, that's just absolutely deeply relatable when you are at a particular point in your life, and or you have a particular kind of parent, and that's just deeply. That's like the most on the nerve. Like that feels like there's a fingernail just pushing down. So yeah, good job.
Thanks.
But I mean, also, like, I think, and maybe Sil can reflect on this. What I love about horror, because I'm a huge horror fan, is that there is something cathartic and encouraging and empowering about pressing on that nerve and then processing that and then coming out the other end. And your character and your story, which I think is not a huge spoiler, does that, like comes through the story, right? And the reader gets a chance to come through the story as well. So I'm wondering if that feeling of dread for you, Sil, and kind of that discomfort was in any way resolved and recontextualized by the journey through the end.
Yeah, my experience of it, and I've definitely heard, like, one of my close friends who is an author, loves horror, is constantly looking for me to read horror, and is talking about this catharsis that I do not in general experience in those kinds of stories. And I'll come back to your actual question in a second, Erik, but the one story mechanism that I've actually fully experienced both the dread and the catharsis is a video game. And it's called The Flame in the Flood. And it's got amazing art, and it's like a post-apocalyptic survival game. And at the very end of it, I'd been playing it for a bit, and it reached that point. I don't know if you've played games enough to, like, you hit an acceleration point where you, like, can't bring yourself to stop because you know you're almost there, and, like, the pressure's getting more. It's like 4 a.m, and the plot breaks through to this point where all of a sudden everything resolves, and you get this point, and I'm, like, sobbing on my couch in the middle of the night, and I'm, like, telling my spouse about it the next day, crying as I describe what happened, because he had watched me play this whole time. And it was horrific as a, like, the story this poor character protagonist went through, and it restored my faith in humanity in the way they ended it. And that kind of catharsis I did not get from the book, but what I did get was there's a point at which I'm trying to say this without spoilering. Erik, be ready for any sort of edits that may need to happen if I'm not successful.
Okay.
There's a point at which she recontextualizes and stops avoiding and starts engaging, and not just with the circumstances and a difficult relationship that became horrific, but with her parent in specific. And that itself was like the agency that she was able to embrace once she recontextualized and started engaging rather than avoiding. Like, that was cathartic for me. It's like, yes, that is how I try and show up in my life. That feels affirmational. That aligns with my values. I love this. So it's like the horrific parts were all the uncomfortable parts about myself that I've done a lot of work on. And then when she breaks through to the other side, it's like, yes, that's who I want to be. And so that was a catharsis of a different kind. Is that what you meant, Erik?
Yeah, I'm just trying to chip away at that hesitation to read horror and to kind of. I think one of the things that you said, Mary, that I actually see a connection here. You talked about books that said something out loud, that you, or maybe not, I guess technically not out loud, but said something directly that you had not heard directly, and it kind of caused it to resonate. And the ability for a story to validate and just twist a reality just ever so slightly, so that it gives you some additional power in interacting with that. And that's kind of what I got from your book, which I do think we should probably talk about, like, in less cryptic terms. Until Death, I think my favorite short, like, elevator pitch for it was "Say Yes to the Dress" meets Rosemary's Baby, which instantly sold me on it. I think you shared the news about the book with the cohort of Viable Paradise classmates, and as soon as you did, I was like, I can see why this was successful as a pitch. You know, we talk as writers sometimes about, like, a high concept or like an easy, like a simple high, and that pitch is just right there. Like, it's one of the strongest ones. It's such a great. You don't imagine those two things going together, but obviously your book puts them together in such a wonderful way.
Yeah, credit to Margie Sarsfield, who wrote a book called Beta Vulgaris, which should go on the list for coining that little turn of phrase, which is pretty sharp.
It's strong. It's a real hook for me, because those are, I wouldn't say I'm like the target audience for Say Yes to the Dress per se, but I'm familiar with it. But I am like a big target audience for, like, Rosemary's Baby.
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
That had me going like, yes.
See, I'm the flip side, right? Like, I'm like, well, how bad can Rosemary's Baby be if there's Say Yes to the Dress in it? And you guys,
wait, have you?
It's pretty bad, guys. Just go in with open eyes.
Celia, have you seen Rosemary's Baby? There's a, I mean, this, you might have to edit this part out too, but there's a bit at the end of, oh God, I won't spoil it, but there's a bit at the end of Rosemary's Baby that I just think is, like, screamingly funny. Like, mostly the movie is, like, creeping dread, like, really, really horrifying. And at the end, I would say, at or following that final turning point of catharsis, there's a moment that I just think is, like, really, really funny. Eric, I'll tell you what it was.
It is a it's a movie that I recommend, because I think that you can get different things from it on rewatch, right? Like, I heard a great theory, a very interesting theory about this from a writing mentor of mine, who actually, I think I talked to. It's Ira Levin, I think, is the author of the original book, and at one point, at some early stage in my mentor's career, had talked to Ira Levin and, like, asked him if this theory was correct, and Levin was like, maybe I could see that. I don't know that it was conscious, but that some of Rosemary's Baby may have been dealing with the kind of generational trauma of thalidomide birth defects, like generation like there was a generation of children born with horrible birth defects from it was like a birth control, if I remember correctly.
It was anti-nausea.
No. Oh, right. It was a treatment that they were giving during pregnancy. Yeah. So but, like, it's interesting, again, like, what I find fascinating about that theory is that you can one, I always think it's interesting that authors are like, I didn't intend that, but maybe, which I always encourage when I'm teaching a workshop. I'm like, if anybody ever says this book made me think this, you just go, yes, it did. Like, unless it's bad, you just always accept that was your inspiration.
Human brains are such pattern-seeking creatures that the back of your head often puts things in there that you don't see in your prefrontal cortex until much later. And I, as not a writer, but as a long-time tabletop RPG gamer, like How I Met My Spouse, like, you'll find yourself doing things that all of a sudden synchronize with what the game master was setting up and your other players were doing, and you didn't consciously know, but you picked up on something enough to set it up. And I feel like that's the coolest part I see in authors, when they're talking about what they did and then they went back and they're like, oh, it is there. I didn't see that at the time. That's so cool.
Yeah, I don't think this is quite what you're saying in terms of patterns, but so Until Death is not about my mother. Like, she doesn't have dementia and she's not horrible. And while I was writing it, I knew that, you know what I mean? But she has since read it, and she said things like, why did you make the mother, like, act like me? Like, why is the mother, like, always calling Ophelia doll? And I was like, you don't call me doll, you call me this other thing. And she was like, I call you doll sometimes. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't, but a lot of real stuff, some real stuff got in on purpose because I was like, I need, like, real details to, like, hang the fake shit on so it feels real. You know what I mean? Yeah. But some of the real details got in by accident. Like, I really did not know that I had done that until, and no one else could have pointed it out to me but her. Like, you know.
See,
crazy.
I find that shit endlessly fascinating. I think that's cool as hell. I mean, I don't know that she thought it was cool, but I think it's cool.
Oh, she doesn't. She's great. She just went to a conference and she bought her galley of the book to the conference and was, like, showing it to everybody. And it's like a conference for, like, hospitals. Like, no one, like, you know, there's no overlap whatsoever. But she's like,
we should talk after. I work in healthcare and in hospitals, so yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you in relationship to, like, real things that might have gotten into the book. Did a like a vineyard do something to you personally?
Yes, it did, Erik.
It's like I read it
plants?
and I'm like, man, grapes are jerks. Like, I don't like grapes anymore. Like the level of horror that is steeped into this vineyard setting, I think is.
I appreciate that. I think that setting for a long time has been one of the things that I struggled with the most. I'm not a visual reader. Like, I don't picture things when I read. And I often, for a really long time, I thought The Great Gatsby, as an example, took place in California. Like, I don't latch on to setting when I go. And so I knew that was a weakness of mine. And with Until Death and with some other works, I was like, okay, I really want to lean into, like, setting as character. Like, setting is something that's evocative, setting is something that's doing something. So I appreciate hearing that, because I tried really hard to lean into something that I had historically not considered one of my strengths. So thanks.
No, I thought you had like a bad vacation that involved a vineyard or something, and you were like, I'll show them. I will immortalize this vineyard fiction.
I mean, I just figured since you guys met at Martha's Vineyard, it was very traumatic, and I've never seen any pictures or know anything about the place. I just assumed.
Did you know, Erik,
I think that's the joke.
Did you know that for a long time, not by the time Viable Paradise happened, but for probably some decades, I thought that Martha's Vineyard was a vineyard owned by Martha Stewart. I thought that was why it was called that.
You know, I remember the first time I heard somebody talk about Martha's Vineyard when I was younger, and that's exactly what I thought too. I bet you that there's, like, if we were to survey people, certainly we've all learned better since then, but probably the first time somebody was like, oh, I'm going to Martha's Vineyard. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. That's clearly Martha Stewart, and she's clearly got a vineyard. No, the island of Martha's Vineyard does not have a vineyard. I remember reading about this a little bit. In fact, I think maybe there was some species of, like, invasive vine or something.
Like kudzu or something?
Yeah, there was something that was that was based off, but it was not high quality. Like, it's not known for being a good vineyard space, which I was actually kind of curious about, because Oregon and Washington and into California, we have a lot of vineyards, and I had no idea that there were any such vineyards in Pennsylvania. So that was an interesting connection that I think helped me to relate to the setting, because I know vineyards from around here. So it instantly gave me like an in.
Cool. Yeah. No, totally. We have vineyards in Pennsylvania, and there's vineyards in Jersey also.
It also made me think of the apple orchards in Chuck Wendig's.
Totally.
Like, Pennsylvania is just full of haunted
produce.
Like produce, yeah.
Going grocery shopping, you're taking your life in your hands.
Ill-advised, yeah. I prefer not to do it for that reason.
So, a lot of times when I'm thinking about books and their connections, and I think it's just how humans interact, period, through stories, but a lot of books are in conversation with previous books. They're like in reaction to, or an outgrowth from, right? Percy Jackson, you bring it up earlier, is a direct homage, to the original Greek myths, which have been captured through the different books you brought up as well. When you think about Until Death, do you feel like there's any books or stories that you read that this is either in direct conversation with or in spite of? Like, I've heard some, I think of Victor Lavelle, and some of his work is basically a big FU to Lovecraft, saying, this is how you do cosmic horror without racism, my dude, which is why I love them. But, like, do you have anything like that when you're thinking about the genesis of it, or in retrospect, even if you didn't intend it to be in the moment?
Yeah, I do. I really loved, and I felt, so the book before Until Death is a book that has not yet seen the light of day. I wrote it and then edited it as part of a now defunct mentorship program called Pitch Wars. And while that book was not getting agent representation, I was reading a lot of what I think of as the first wave of a subgenre that has in the last couple of years become very popular, which is like weird girl horror lit. And I was thinking, and sort of the top examples for me would be Mona Awad's Bunny and Otessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which have very little in common apart from the fact that I think that they can basically both fall under the umbrella of this subgenre. But I was reading those, and I was reading a bunch of other ones. Jasmine Chan's The School of Good Mothers is another one. There's a book called Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. There's a book called Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. And for all of them, I was like, this is what I was trying to do with the book that went through Pitch Wars. And all of these books are on the shelf. And why are these books on the shelf? And mine is not working out. And then I was like, no, really? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are these books on the shelf and mine is not working out? And so I really did study these books that I thought were doing a thing that I was trying to do, which is, I don't know, talk about the weirdnesses of like a certain like American demographic female experience through like a twisty, weird, very, very voicey horror lens. You know, I wanted my book to fit there among these other books that I was really, really enjoying. So I would say, even though I know being like, I tried to write for a subgenre is like a weird way to say, like, in conversation. Those were the books
I don't
that
think so. I think that makes complete sense to me.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you enjoyed a series of books, and they inspired you to do something your own within that cohort.
Yeah,
Also,
I think I just meant as opposed to something like Percy Jackson, which is clearly like a direct
like a
retelling.
lineage almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a specific aha moment you had when you were studying those books that led you to Until
Totally, it was voice. The ones that were really
Okay.
my favorites had a really, really gripping voice from the jump, and
Yeah, that's
the weirdness was also at least partly a result of the voice. Like, I don't think you can have My Year of Rest and Relaxation without the voice. And so that was something that I was about to say that was something that I'm really excited about with Until Death. I do think it's a very, very like voicey book. But also after I sort of had that breakthrough, it works for everything. Like, once I penetrate the voice of something, it gets a lot easier to do everything else with other projects as well.
well, and I my experience in reading Until Death was you start bold. You bring it, you bring
Thank you.
You bring it. Like I was hooked because of the voice within like
Thank you.
a paragraph. Maybe the first sentence. Maybe the first sentence was enough to get me to, because you start with. I remember having when I was in an undergrad in an English program, one of my professors was suggesting, and it was interesting because different English professors will have very different opinions on how voicey you should be in your academic essays. But this particular English professor actually encouraged me to be a little more bold in my opening for essays. So I was specifically, I want to say I was writing something about. I'm trying to remember the name of the poet. He did a poem, Mrs. G. I'm just drawing an absolute blank. I'll have to look it up so that Cylia can add it to our list at the end. But my professor was like, start bold. Start with like a statement that makes people like ask questions and is possibly polarizing, and then get to your thesis statement for your
like
essay.
Be punchy.
Yeah, and I remember actually, like, I don't know that did me many favors in academia, but it certainly helped me creatively to, like, think about, because we often, as writers, are occasionally held, well, I say often, and then we are sometimes held by the tyranny of likability. Like, make your main character as likable as possible. So if you have your main character start out as your main character does, saying something that you're like, well, I'm going to need more context. like, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain
1 minute.
yourself. But it's not a long time, because you start out with like a pretty bold, and I don't want to spoil it, but I do encourage people.
I mean,
when
it is
there's
the first
debate.
sentence. So.
The first line, I'll spoil it so you don't have to, is, in January I looked at my mother and I thought someone should kill her, and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, no, and that's a like you show up with that line, right? Like that's a line that, like, I imagine 80% of the writing groups have ever been involved with would be like, I don't know, is that unlikable? And then it's the people that go like, hang on, are the ones that both break through with the book, and they're the ones that I think are the more valuable people to read your work, to make sure.
Well, I
that you
think
get
it sets
there,
a bar, right? And then you rose to meet it, which was fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I loved your opening chapter. Was just such a because the speculative element, or the horror element doesn't really kick in immediately. So it's the horror of mundanity. Initially.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny talking about horror with this book, because when we talk about horror, we are always talking about, like, the spooky thing, like the spooky thing that's not real. And the first example I was going to use was ghosts, and I was like, are ghosts real? I don't know, but but ghosts are something with tentacles, or like monsters of some sort. That's what we typically, or, the Overlook Hotel, like whatever, like that's what we typically mean by horror. And I think that the horror in this book is actually that the mother has, like, very severe dementia that's going to get worse. Like, it only goes one way. So even though the speculative element of the book does not reveal itself until later, I think to me it always felt like a horror novel.
Yeah,
like, even when we were talking about the mundane, it felt like a horror novel.
Well, and my baseline is not supernaturalness for horror, because I have read, and it probably is what turned me off it so strongly, like Misery by Stephen King.
Totally.
No supernatural. That's just awful things happen.
Or Silence of the Lambs is one that I think of as a horror novel that has no speculative element. And you could argue that they're like horror thriller, I mean, again, now we're getting into the questions of the subgenre, but yeah, but they feel like horror novels to me, just going by how they feel like horror novels to me.
Well, and I think to the success of Until Death, even though in retrospect we know when there is some supernatural spooky stuff going on, like by the time we get to the end of the book, maybe I've just spoiled it, but as you're reading it, it's not. You exist because your point of view, and this is me being a writing nerd, because your point of view is so close to the main character, and your main character doesn't know what's going on. The reader is taken along for that ride. So all we know is that her experience is horrible, like horrific, right? And it's, the cause honestly doesn't really matter. like that doesn't dramatically change or functionally change the emotional resonance of the experience. We know that the main character is having a rough time,
having a bad time.
Yeah, she is going through it. And if at the end of the story it was just marsh gas or like an example of whatever, or if we find out that it's a Cthulhu, or it doesn't matter in a horror story. I mean, it does to a certain degree. Like, readers are certainly going to care about those things, but for the emotional part and for the horror part, which is emotion, it doesn't matter if the horror comes from tentacles or ghosts or
totally
just fucking vineyards.
Often, unfortunately, when you find out where it came from, it gets dries up. That's one of the reasons why I love Shirley Jackson's work so much, is because it's very, very hard to never have to give it away in a way that's not unsatisfying in the other direction. You know what I mean? And Shirley Jackson, I'm thinking of The Haunting of Hill House specifically, but she manages to do it.
I just read that within the last 6 months, and it's to my great shame that I hadn't read it earlier, because it is considerably more brilliant than anybody led me to believe.
It's
and
really
I think that it is the way that Shirley Jackson just never just holds the secrets. Like, and honestly, it by the end of it, it doesn't matter. Like, I think the thing about The Haunting of Hill House is that the stuff that by the end of the book that terrified me and kept me awake and actually literally cost me sleep after reading it was the behavior of the other characters towards the main character, and how they were gaslighting her or undermining, and the inability of the main character to even trust her perceptions. That's the stuff that's terrifying when you have to and you play in that space so effectively in Until Death, because what is the scariest thing is to lose the trust of your own senses and your own judgment, and that's exactly where you dive straight into in Until Death. Is what if your senses and your judgment may be wrong, and dementia is maybe that writ large.
That's what I was just thinking. Is I think this might have, in my initial outlines or conceptions of the book, been more probably direct than how it landed on the page, which I think is a good thing. But I was like, Ophelia is going through, over the course of the book, what her mother is going through. She can't trust her own mind anymore. So, sad.
One of the themes that I observed, while there's of course male-coded characters in it, was a conversation with, so maybe less than a book, but around gendered expectations, around femininity, around what is appropriate for women, mother and daughter dynamics, even one of the antagonists, and there's layers of gendered expectations, defiance, capitulation. There's so many pieces in there that I found distressing in a really productive way. Was that a conscious intersection, or is that something that you found a natural outgrowth of writing a mother-daughter story?
I don't know that I would separate those two things. That's a really interesting question. I think what I'm trying to think about, just backing up, I think when I'm trying to think about the theme of a work or what I'm trying to do or say with it, the most effective way for me to do that, not only in execution but in my own mind, is through one character. What is this one character going through? What is this one character going to learn? Which is typically a thing that I either want to learn or have been talking about a lot in therapy. But so in this case, because it was a mother-daughter book, and because it is about this one character who is a woman grappling with the expectations she has for herself and with the expectations she perceives that other people have for her, whether they do or not, I don't think that could be separated from her gender. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it becomes because of her gender being female, it becomes a critique or an interrogation of gender in the first place.
Right. It wouldn't have looked like that if she was a dude, like, or it would have, but it would have been that dude's story, and so because it was a dude, it would have just ended up different.
Could have been an
Also,
interrogation of masculinity instead.
Right. Yeah. Or even like if he's performing in a way that's, considered to be traditionally feminine, like what does that mean and why in this context? Also, I could not have written that book, but it's kind of fun to think about. I don't know, maybe later.
You can do that. You can do that thing. What is it?
I'm gonna gender swap it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do
wasn't it Stephanie Meyer?
I was gonna say I'm gonna do like the Christian Grey or Stephanie Meyer. They've both done it. Yeah.
Yeah, where they do the same story, but they switch the point of view to the male character.
This book would be so boring from Luke's point of view.
Yep.
You'd just be like, I was working in the wood shop.
Yeah.
Weird stuff keeps happening.
I don't know.
Not even that often, though. Like from his perspective, it's like three really strange incidents.
Yeah.
And they get progressively weirder.
And he's also like, why is this is Mitchell, but he's also like, why is this cute girl acting all weird? Like, so cute though. I'll see. Yeah.
What was the last thing that you read that you really think we should read and why?
There are so many, obviously, answers to this question.
Give me them.
So in terms of horror, which is what we've been sitting here talking about, Cylia, I don't think you should read this one. But I was really, really impressed and thrilled by Andrew Joseph White's You Weren't Meant to Be Human. Have you read that, Erik? I know they were talking about it. Okay, no. Yeah, it was it was really weird. It went all the way in, leaned all the way into a place that most people just don't go. And just the execution on what felt like a very singular vision was just, I thought it was a very ambitious book. And I thought it really nailed it.
Was this a 2025 release, or did this come out?
I think so. I think it was a 2025 release.
But the execution of it was on point.
I think the execution, but you know what? I would say even more than the execution, I would say the singularity of vision. This was a person who, it felt to me, set out to write a really specific book that nobody else, I don't think, could have conceived of, and then he wrote it. So, loved that. In terms of a totally different genre, I really recently enjoyed, I think her name is pronounced Young Mi Meyer, or Young Mi Meyer. She has a book of personal essays that came out in 2024 called I'm Laughing Because I'm Crying, which one of the things that impresses me in personal essay that I think is hard to do is that it feels like she sees something clearly and then she writes it down clearly. And I feel like a lot of personal essayists do one of those things, but not both. And then just in general, I never miss a chance to plug either the works of Kay Chronister. I really, really loved The Bogwife, and I also loved her first novel, Desert Creatures. Just good, hella well written, good weird books. And I also loved a book called Help Me, which was a very, very, very slim horror novelette that was published a couple of years ago from a guy, I think his name is pronounced Nabin Ruthnam, and that was really good too. Just really, really, really sharp. So what is your book consumption like? Are you mostly reading horror? Are you reading? You mentioned personal essays. I'm kind of curious. What is your variety? How does it break down? Yeah, it's pretty wide ranging. So right now I'm reading the short stories of Flannery O'Connor.
Oh gosh, good stuff.
I'm doing I'm following somebody has like an online book club where they're doing a slow read of Paradise Lost, where you read one book a month. I'm really enjoying that. But I did just read You Weren't Meant to Be Human, and I also just read Sarah Gailey's Spread Me.
I love that one.
So I'm reading sort of like, if I'm reading nonfiction, sometimes I splice it in with other things. So I'm reading a nonfiction like craft book called The Heroine's Journey, which I read a couple years ago, but I'm reinvestigating. So that's stuff, that kind of thing. So
Oh, I've been creepily checking out your background books shelves this entire time. I'm like,
oh, I don't know if this is a particularly representative set, but I do own them all, so they're up there.
I see
So
Pullman. There's some.
there's a lot of, you're in like, this is P, so you're in like the Pullman section right here, basically. I haven't actually read this one, but it's very, very beautiful, so I'm hanging on to it until, oh, you know what? This one is, just as another wild card option, this was the best biography I've ever read. This is a biography of Pearl Buck, who wrote The Good Earth, and the first line, I found it in like a used bookstore, and the first line is, Pearl Sidenstricker was born into a family of ghosts. And the whole book is like that. I was like, what the hell? Like, you know what I mean? Like, these are supposed to be, like, boring. Like, these are supposed to be dry. And this is another one with, like, a singularity of vision that I think really executes on it. So, anyway, that can go back there.
And so, as you approach your debut and you look forward, are you going to stay in the horror lane, or are you thinking about? Yeah, you're
I dig
into
it.
Yeah,
I am into
all
it.
in.
Yeah. I kind of also at some point want to write like a very short nonfiction book about a guy called Henry Chapman Mercer who lived in Bucks County. That's the only project I have where I'm like, someday I'm going to get to that one, and that's like on top of my mind, and it's not a horror book. But that's neither here nor there. The actual answer to your question is yes, I am sticking with horror for the time being.
So does go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say Erik, which I feel like is very different from your approach. I feel like you're
I'm
very cross-genre. You're very playful.
My agent is not necessarily thrilled with that all the time. But like, it can be harder. It can be harder to manage somebody's career if they have creative ADHD.
But I feel like then the stuff you produce is like so good. Like, it's so you know what? It's really exciting. Like, I feel like so many of us writers have been reading for so long that eventually it feels like it's really hard to find something that just feels like something totally unlike what you've seen before. And I feel like your stuff is like that. So, I think that's cool. Anyway.
I'm a fan of the,
I know that
the
when I
non-horror
approach,
I read of yours. So, I stand what I know you can put into the world, Erik.
I do. I basically, between projects, I decide what is the most dramatically different thing that I can work next, and then that's often what drives me. You mentioned Bucks County, and you also mentioned, obviously, Until Death takes place around Pennsylvania. How much does your local geography play into your voice or your creative output?
Yeah, I think as earlier I said that I, with Until Death, thought a lot more about setting, and I think it is just more intuitive to think about setting with places that you are surrounded by. For my next novel, and we'll see if it ever sees the light of day, I have been thinking a lot about the Jersey Shore. In my own head, I'm calling it Jersey Shore Gothic. And so... But yeah, just like these are local spaces that for whatever reason, while I was like driving through them or sitting in them or living in them or whatever, felt in some way resonant to my heart.
So is Pennsylvania like is that setting like a part of you? Because some people can live in a place and they're like, yeah, it was a place I lived in. Some people are like, no,
Yeah, I think so. I grew up in South Jersey, quite close to Philadelphia. We can call that sort of the same. That's the same region. And then I lived in England very, very briefly during study abroad, Baltimore, New York, and Mississippi. And I would say that the place this place, Philadelphia, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Jersey Shore, is one of the places that I have the deepest and most intense feelings about in terms of something I could put on the page. And then Mississippi is actually the other one.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. I might turn out to have like a Baltimore or a New York book in me, but like in my heart, they didn't get quite as much of a foothold, I don't think. I feel like
Maybe
you're
I
a
have to
Portland
visit
guy.
them more.
Yeah.
I am, yeah, I kind of got it. I think
Yeah.
even though I don't think I've written anything set in Portland.
I'm a Philly girl.
It permeates. Yeah, it permeates who I am, and there's an attitude that comes out, I think, from where there. I think we've talked. So we talk sometimes about the connections of communities and places to stories and context, which is what really excites me, and it's sort of why I'm all in on this particular project that Cylia and I are working on. Why Connect the Plots is so fascinating to me. It's to see, the way that some one thing flows to the next, and sometimes that's a community of other writers, or a community of friends, or even just your parents and a connection that you have with them from the material they shared with you. Sometimes it's the other work, and just all of that continuity of everything that connects together. And I've always been particularly fascinated with like the Algonquin Roundtable and the New England writers, and that sort of place and community as exchange, of creativity. I think that's one of the things that I was really excited about with Viable Paradise, is that that 24 of us gathered together on that island, and we connected by kind of. I still find myself inspired by, challenged by, supported by certainly all of that class. Like it stays with you. So that's why I'm curious about Philly and your connections.
Yeah, Oh, sorry, go on, Celia, you go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I feel like that is a deeply human thing. Like, it's one of the reasons I'm so interested in stories, is stories are how we tell ourselves who we are, or who we saw, or who not to be. And communities are, like, connection between humans are so important to do the same thing, and so I feel like they're inherently interrelated and connected. And so of course a cohort style course like that, right, you're all leveling up and growing in this kind of forced crucible. How can you not maintain those connections? It's I think it's one of the
Discord
reasons...
helps.
Yeah, no.
But I think it's one of the reasons why when I look for authors that I really love their stories, I start looking up, who do they recommend? What books are they in conversation with? Who was their editor? Who else did they support and edit? What publishing house? What agent? Right? And you start seeing the through lines of, oh, I trust Dongwon Song and the stories that are chosen, therefore I'm going to keep an eye on that so I can get more of those stories that resonate with me, because I'm just insatiable. I will never have enough enough
How
books
much
to
do you read? Eric was like, you read more than anybody he knows. How much do you think you read a year?
I would say 100 a year, but last year I only read 82.
Okay.
Science fiction, fantasy books.
Do you read like mostly or exclusively science fiction and fantasy, or do
Yes,
you like do a lot
unless
of reading
it's, like,
that's not books?
Healthcare and social determinants of
Sure.
health and equity,
Sure.
diversity and equity, and that's my what's important to me. But my coping skill for existing in the world is reading books. It's not
Okay.
it's not a virtue. It is a coping skill for me personally.
It can be both, but what are some of y'all's favorites?
Oh gosh, turning the
tables have turned.
So, I the reason I always start with book DNA is I have a tripart section of what built Cylia as she is today, which includes I have validated this with external sources. I taught myself to read on a book of nursery rhymes and fairy tales, which includes a story called How the Sea Became Salt, and it has this red, black, and white illustration of a man surrounded by demons. And so I was literally 3 and 4 years old saying, yep, this is how the world works.
And you don't like horror at all.
I was just going to say that.
And then
It's too real.
The Dark Crystal I saw in the theater as a wee young one because my parent thought that Jim Henson meant it would be like the Muppets. And she was a very young parent and walked out shell-shocked. And I was obsessed with it and loved it. And so I was like 3 years old and like, yes, this is the way. This is how, even now I still keep unpacking all the ways in which my fundamental belief system is based on this very weird movie that I love with my whole heart. And then the third is, let's see, the Harper Hall trilogy.
I can't see that from here.
Yeah, it's small. Anne McCaffrey's Pern series, specifically the Harper Hall trilogy.
Okay.
It was the book I read in 5th grade that told me there's a way out. You can find your people. You don't have to be like this always. And so if you know those 3 parts, you can reprogram me.
Cool.
The
Good
reboot,
to know.
just like there's a spot, you put a pen in, hold it down.
It's
and
actually
then
3
it'll ask
spots.
some
You have to hit them
validation
all at the same
questions.
time.
I am a weirdo in that I write science fiction and fantasy and horror, but I did read some of that, but I don't know how much of that ended up actually being fundamental to me when I was younger.
Sure.
And I didn't actually start writing science fiction, fantasy, and horror and until more recently. So I actually spent most of my writing was doing more literary fiction stuff, and in fact I would do a lot more studying of quote literary fiction authors, and so I got really obsessed with. I mean, if you can find again authors that had like a particular cabal around them of like other authors that they interacted with, that always fascinated me the most. So Nathaniel Hawthorne and that era, all of those authors I was really interested in. I'm also terrible at remembering proper nouns, which is one of the ongoing jokes, which I think is the what is the name of that group of authors called? Like my wife knows this better than I do, ironically. But like Hawthorne, Wadsworth, or not Wadsworth. Yeah, this is where
I'm
I
not gonna get it.
that particular period in New England, and then I was really interested in
And then
Ernest
the
Hemingway
Algonquin
and
folks.
the Algonquin folks, Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and
Sure.
I think what interested me about them as a kind of a formative thing as a creator and also just as a reader was I don't know, there is something I imprint on the experience and the context of a work. So when I asked you about, like if you can go back and reread something and reconnect with that experience, that's something that I think about. I almost never reread a book, and the reason is because rereading a book is that the rereading would be a completely different and new experience because it's all about the context of when I read it. And in that way it may be fascinating and I may learn something completely new, but the actual like context of it is so critical. Like Cylia mentions the Harper Hall trilogy, and she recommended that to me as we were starting on this project for us to get to know each other better. And I know that like I know that I read I think the first book and finished it sitting specifically in the chair directly behind me, and the sense memory of where I was sitting, the lighting in the room, and the entire context of reading that book is so inexorable for me from the book itself. So it becomes like a whole complicated memory. Like I say I enjoyed reading it, but I enjoyed reading it in addition to where I was at on that particular day, where, you know, all of those things, and that's why I'm hesitant to revisit those things, and that's why it's also why so I know that Cylia will always try to pin me down and be like, pick 3 things, Erik, and it's so hard for me because they're all like I enjoyed reading Madeleine L'Engle on a bus ride from Southern Oregon to Los Angeles when I was like 3 days after my 11th birthday. You know, and we had Kool-Aid in a little container, and I was reading it with a flashlight at 11 o'clock at night. Like, it's that experience is what I remember.
That's a very poetic way, I think, to experience work. I don't. That's
It's
touching to me for some reason. No, I love that. I mean, it's not like that for me. But that's like they're all little tattoos. Like, there's something very like illustrated man about it. I think that sounds kind of special. So, yeah.
I'm just omnivorous, and I agree with you, Erik, in that the sense memory is part of it. I don't think have such a strong sense memory as maybe you do, but also I want all of the versions of that story. I want the story when I was 11 years old. I want the story when I was nursing my child. I want the story when I'm rereading it because I had a rough day. Like, I am the Scylla of Greek myth, or Scylla, where there is a hunger around my belt that can never be satisfied. So I'll just keep reading. I did check Transcendentalist Authors of Concord, Massachusetts.
There we
included
go.
Emerson, Henry David Thoreau,
Thank
and
you.
Louisa May Alcott.
Yep. I was specifically thinking of Alcott and Emerson. Alcott, I think they had I want to say they had like a weird, I say weird in the sense that it was weird for the context, no judgment. Like, I think they had like a vegan commune, which was very out of the ordinary for that time period. I also may be fully making this up. Like, I am guilty of that as well. But I do remember it was either a vegan or vegetarian, like writers and intellectual compound that I found fascinating.
Well, and if I remember right, were they also abolitionists as well?
Yeah, they were, and they're just these little stories. And again, like I get, you know, to connect to that sense memory, a lot of these are authors that I read under particular professors, and they when I think of reading these authors, I remember the particular professors, and it kind of it hooks me, and you know, it's like the falling dominoes. Like, first I remember the story, then I remember the context of the story, then I remember the professor, and then I remember all of the other things about that professor, and it's like a whole journey into like an interconnected element of my life.
Erik, you said
It's
you
like
don't have
it's
an
like the Star
associative
Trek
memory.
meme.
You do have an associative memory. You
I guess
silly,
but it's my library card catalog is all for like my internal experiences. So it'll be like this is cross referenced with Sweaty Neck August 1997.
It's so interesting, Erik, that also one of the things that really speaks to, or that like, I don't know, speaks to you or like resonates with you or like that your interest latches onto, is these communities of writers, because I feel like I maybe said this earlier, but you're one of the most like community-oriented writers I think I know. Like, I actually know a lot of people, like a lot of writer people, and I think you know about like 10 times as many as I do. You're just really, really like, I don't know, you're just really, really committed to community. So on some level, I'm like, oh, sure, he like, you know what I mean? He like loves these communities of people. Like, that's...
Cylia wants to read all the books, and... Yeah, Cylia wants to read all the books, and I wanna understand all the contexts of all the books.
Nice. Love that.
What else do we have on the questions list, Cylia?
We hit them all.
Awesome.
So, Mary, you mentioned to us earlier, before we started recording, that you are not on the socials, but you do have a website.
I have
and
Substack.
You do have a newsletter.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
your
the
newsletter's
newsletter's
great,
on
by the way.
Substack.
I made a note to myself to specifically call out your newsletter because is an author that needs to be better about bringing a pen to signings. I think it was your most recent newsletter. You're like, this is the pen. And I just immediately was like, I got to get a bunch of those, because I never have pens, and whenever I do, I'm always like, they're crap. But you were
Someone
like, this is the pen. Get
Someone
this
else
particular pen.
just bought it on that newsletter recommendation and immediately got to me and was like, it's really good. So, just saying. Yep. Yeah, so the website is MTG Berman. Oh, go on.
No, you go.
Oh, no, I was just going to plug my
say
website.
a silly thing
I'm just
about
slow.
which pens to take notes with versus sign.
Okay, I'll go. The website is mtgberman.com, and the newsletter is mtgberman.substack.com. But I do also want to know Cilia's thoughts.
Isn't that like... Wasn't the subtitle of your newsletter something like Mary Devours or something? Am I remembering that correctly? I was looking at it today to try to remember if there was a particular title for it.
Yes, the newsletter is called Mary the Devourer because at some point in my life I heard or read that people who read a lot in the Renaissance era were called devourers, and I have never once been able to find a single piece of research to confirm this. I don't think it's true, but I'm rolling with it anyway.
It sounds like a great fact myth.
I think it's fake.
You're
I think
gonna
I'm also
manifest it
lagging,
into
so
being
I'm
if
sorry,
it wasn't
you
true
guys.
before. We'll fix it in post, and if not, then it's just flavor text for the pod.
Okay.
No, my silly pen comment was, I think I recognize that pen, and I think I have a couple at different widths in the back, but I don't use it for note taking because it is so good at permanence, which is what makes it good for signing. I love the feeling of writing with a pen, and I hate typos, even in handwriting. Therefore, I prefer to use the friction pens, which are erasable. So you get all the benefits of pen writing, but also erasable, and they come in these like little rainbow packs. And if something can be either iridescent or rainbow or both, and then you stack on erasable pens, I mean, I'm here for it. So that is my current note-taking writing implement of choice.
Awesome.
Mary, are you doing anything coming up for the book launch for Until Death, which let's make sure that we mention is coming out the 19th of May is the release date? At least that's what I saw on the internet, so hopefully I'm not lying.
Still true. Yep. The Until Death comes out Tuesday, May 19th, 2026, wherever books are sold. I will be in Brooklyn at the Twisted Spine bookstore on Tuesday the 19th. I will be in conversation with Carrie Cullen, author of House of Beth. Throw it on the bookshop. That book is really, really good. On Wednesday the 20th, I will be in Boston at Lovestruck Books in conversation with Amanda Deal, the host of the Smart Bitches Trashy Books podcast. And on the 21st, Thursday, I will be here in Philadelphia at Head House Books, hometown event with ML Rio, author of When We Were Villains, or If We Were Villains. Super embarrassing that I can't remember which word it is. Also The Graveyard Shift, also Hot Wax, which is her newest. And then I'll be sleeping. Awesome. And I might be at StokerCon in Pittsburgh. Come to StokerCon. So.
Man, I really
Are you coming?
To hit StokerCon this year. I just the timing. I want to. I'll go next year. That's my commitment. If I can't make it this year, it's going to be. I know it's going to be in Pittsburgh 2 years in a row. And
okay.
So if I can't make it happen, I'm gonna come next year for sure, because I know so many people that are gonna some of our classmates are gonna be there, and some other folks that I just hear it's a blast. It's one of the last big
I've never been.
national conventions I haven't been to. I have heard nothing but wonderful things about StokerCon.
Awesome. Are you going to the Nebulas instead?
So
I know they're at the same
have
time.
a blast. And they are no. I'm doing 4th Street Fantasy, which is like 2 weeks after, I think, and I'm just the That's why I'm a maybe. Like, I maybe could go to the Stoker Con, but it's just Stokers I'm not technically busy, and that's why it's possible. But then I waited too long and plane tickets and all that stuff.
Oh, so. Yeah, sure.
But do you have anything that you're particularly excited about with the launch, or is it just like you've got these things to do and then you wanna rest? Is there like I'm thinking about, like, when I do a book launch, I know what bookstores I wanna go to.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a tour. Like, since I was 5 years old, I wanted to go to some places and see some people and sign some books. So it's really, truly a dream come true for me. I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to places where I have friends and family. So I'm excited about that too. And I'm just, it all feels very high stakes. So I'm just really trying to cling to the fact that I got here. Like, I did it. I did it. The thing that I'm excited for is the fact that I did it. And I have to remember that. Like, when I sold the book, I was like, no matter how this goes.
And now it's in our heads.
Yeah. And no matter how this goes, I was like, no one can take this from me. Like, no matter how it goes from this point on, no one can take this from me. So, There you go. And sorry again about the lag. It's definitely happening. I apologize.
Yeah, I think it's like 2 seconds, which is sort of hilarious because it's just enough that it's slightly confusing.
Just so much as we can talk over each other. It's super great. It's great podcasting. No, I think it's real. When I think about how my conversations go in real life, my friends are often talking over me and vice versa because that's how humans communicate. I am so grateful to have met you, Mary. I'm so happy that I was a brave, brave girl and put your scary, scary book in my head. I got through it and I liked it even. Thank you for joining us and helping us connect all the plots of your stories and the books that made you who you are, and by joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I know, sorry, God. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really lovely, and this has been a thoroughly enjoyable conversation. Thank you.
You've been listening to Connect the Plots with Cylia and Erik. Thanks. Please connect with us on social media. We're Connect the Plots Pod on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. You can also support us and gain access to exclusive content on our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/Connect the Plots Pod, all spelled out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.